Okay, there's no problem. That's it. One window in the garage. I have trash. Don't call me. Go ahead, don't call me Clark. That's me.
I just saw it growing up, because we didn't have a TV. That's what I'm told.
No. Okay, I'm safe.
Yeah.
You're ready.
Okay, it is 9 o'clock Monday morning, and we are ready to start a meeting to talk about advisory vote, referendums, et cetera, et cetera.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
You may.
This is Commissioner Williams and for yourself. As I was preparing and drafting language for the advisory vote, I decided that I would look into trying to find some historical documents and historical record of what has occurred with previous boards of commissioners. And what I found was in our FAIR file, a motion in order to amend the agenda from May 27th, 2014. And this is from Commissioner Bailey. And the discussion is decision regarding memorandum of understanding for parking lot use of Bonner County real-owned property. And this was added to the agenda for a timeliness issue. I'd also like to bring to your attention that the deputy clerk at that time was Darcy Smith. Now, on the second page, Mr. Chairman, it says an MOU for parking lot use of Bonner County-owned real property. A part of Bonner County-owned real property adjacent to the fairgrounds is presently available for use by the Bonner County Fair Board as a parking lot. This area was previously used by the Bonner County Sheriff's Department, and they are not currently using this area. The Bonner County Commissioner's intention is that this parcel be made available exclusively for parking use by the Bonner County Fair Board. This MOU was passed unanimously by Chairman Kelly, signed by Commissioner Nielsen, and signed by Commissioner Bailey. And on the third page, it shows the property in question. And the property in question is the exact location that we are here today to discuss. In addition, on the fourth page, there's another illustration from March 7th of 2014 that shows, again, the exact area in question. So, Mr. Chairman, what I have discovered is that this property has not been in dispute for 10 years. This property is, in the words of Chairman Kelly, the Bonner County's Commissioner's intention is that this parcel be made available exclusively for parking use by the Bonner County Fair Board. In addition, as I was going through and in preparation for this meeting, I looked at the grant applications that began in 2019. In 2019, there was a IDPR grant submitted for phase 1. The documentation clearly shows the exact same property as the one in question. So that was 2019. It was approved by the Fair Board and the Bonner County Commissioners in 2020. In 2022, additionally, there was another grant application made for the $473,315. Accompanying that packet as well, Mr. Chairman, was another diagram showing the exact same property. Not only was this approved, but the Fair Board, in addition, through their minutes, has had multiple meetings, and in addition, they voted to expend $25,000 of fees to make a 5% match. And so therefore, Mr. Chairman, what I would present to you is that we don't need an advisory ballot because this, for the last 10 years, has been clearly designated by a legal memorandum on file with the county. In addition, it says the discussion decision regarding placement of RV park on current fairgrounds designated property. This property is currently designated fairgrounds property according to this memorandum dated May 27th, 2014, and I would ask that we just adjourn this meeting.
So I would like to give a response to that. So it is not currently property of the fairground. What it is being used by the fairground. So I'll remind the board that a prior board cannot bind a future board for something. And what is being requested by the current fair board isn't to build their RV campground on that site. It's actually to continue to use it as the parking lot, which is what they have been using it as. To do anything other than that, it actually binds the land up itself. And so if your request is to continue using it as a parking lot, as is the current request from the sitting board of the fair, that's reasonable, because that's what they've been asking for. I think it's unreasonable for the board to decide how the fair board would spend their $25,000 match agreement to their grant. Basically, and I'm assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that when you spoke with Sewell, as I wasn't present, the cost of this boundary line adjustment that you claimed in that meeting was the only right of recovery was $25,000. How does this board have the right to tell the fair board that that's what they would spend that $25,000 for? So in order to move forward, the fair board is saying, let us make our own decision. We would, and Jody sent the email, they want the fair board out of the contention of the county. They want the fairgrounds to be able to put the RV park in their chosen section, and they want this red area that you're identifying that was under a prior MOU to be continually used as a parking lot, which is what both the sheriff and fairgrounds want. So if your motion is to put the RV campground on existing fairground property, because this is not fairground property, what you're citing is to use it as for the fairground parking lot. That's in line with what the community and what the fairground wants. But when you say that that is identified as where they want their fairgrounds, it's not accurate. I think you've misrepresented the meetings you've attended and the information. If you listen to that hearing on Thursday, where I wasn't present, you provided information to Commissioner Bradshaw that said the boundary line adjustment was the only way that the fair board could move forward with their grant. That was not true, yet the fairground has repeatedly asked this board to step out of this issue, allow them to place their RV campground where they want to on their property, which even in the email that Jody sent you, she gives you the idea of where that is. And allow this to maintain parking lot use because it allows it to be future used for whether we're going to do an expansion or continue it as a parking lot. So I don't agree with your summary, and I will clearly point out that finding an MOU for a parking lot doesn't mean that this board is bound to that, because you can't do that. So I would move that, since we're speaking about the location of the parking lot, or the RV campground, I would make a motion that this board allow the questionable piece of land to remain the parking area for fairground and sheriff facility use, and that the fairground identifies their campground site on their current existing fairground property. And it's important, I think, after it's motioned and seconded, that the community get their opportunity to speak about that.
Is there a second? Okay, that motion dies.
I will point out, Commissioner Bradshaw, when we had...
I'm sorry, I was speaking, but you'll get your chance, I'm sure. So this MOU has existed since 2014, and you were elected sheriff when?
2008.
So you knew about this all along, but you continued to tell the public that it was sheriff's property.
Can I speak on that, please?
Oh, absolutely.
I'd love to speak on
Yeah.
that. Mr. Chairman, Board of Directors, and Board, if you look, continue on that, it says, the motion to that is I move that the Bonner County approve the memorandum of understanding which allows the Bonner County Fair Board exclusive rights for the use of the county owned real property as parking lot, which is now being used. It wasn't used to expand the property as a parking lot. I think it's important, Mr. Chairman and Board, that when legislation is passed, you always try to look at the intent of those legislators that are passing that. This was some legislative process of those board members back then in 2014. It was the purpose of using that property exclusively for a parking lot and not for expansion. And if you go back when we had this argument and fight with the skating rink, the commissioners, Kelly, who was on that board at the time, came and testified that the intention was to use that property for expansion of the board. And that has been a theme throughout the last several years and the time that I have been in the office. And during a workshop in 2019 on February 14th, some of the language and some of the communication that was made, and part of it was when Commissioner Dan McDonald said, but there's another bigger conversation that's been bantering around, and what's being bantered around, maybe I'm just taking to myself, quote, is looking not at the jail, at a new jail, getting out of the courthouse, getting out of the prosecutor's office, getting out of the public defenders, put everything out on the guy's property, so the guy is me, so that the Justice Center, that includes the jail. And Teddy said, wouldn't that cut the cost of transportation? Dan, it would cut the cost of transportation. We wouldn't have traffic and all that stuff. And I mentioned staffing. And Jeff Conley, I agree, but, and then Dan said, well, when we can put them all in one building and actually save money overall per square foot, design and whole shooting match at once. And Jeff said, right. Then Dan continued, even if we decide to build a new jail, it's not going to happen tomorrow, which I never said it would. And then it goes on, Dan says, if we dump that property downtown, let's just say, and that what we have, the buyer that's motivated, that's going to set off a bunch of costs right here. And I mentioned before during that conversation, Dan said, at least we own the property and we peed in all four corners. If you look at the intention of the last board, the last several boards, and when the property was purchased, it was for the intention of building a complex. And part of that, as I've explained before, has gone, we have a new jail, we have a dispatch center, we have a Marine division. We expanded that jail for a juvenile detention center. And so that is very consistent, and I have never said that that was not county property. I said it was designated through all of the other commissioners as property developed for a Justice Center complex. And it was designated in 2014 for parking only, not to expand the courthouse, or the jail, or the fairgrounds.
Thank you for that explanation. I think one of the things that you have to look at when you look at the MOU is, one, it says current county property, it does not say fairground property. But part of the rationale for this was that it was not currently in use, but even in the MOU, it specifically states until further notice, which gives you the opportunity. So I think it's a disingenuous retort to say that this was always intended to be fairground. It's not being used now, let's use it as a parking lot until we need to do something differently with it. But even the description in the memorandum of understanding, it calls this piece of land a county piece of land. It's not calling it fairground land. Fairground land has specific ties to what you can do on it. This is not just a discussion between a sheriff's office and this Board of Commissioners. This impacts the entire community. It isn't just the electeds. If we have to find land for that expansion, where do we have to do? The probability is if tomorrow was the day we had the multi-million dollars to build that jail, and we put a campground on that particular parking lot site, we would have to buy new property to an exorbitant amount of cost. So if we're going to be good stewards of taxpayer money, we have to look at a plan in the future. And so this is reasonable that it's used as the parking lot because it's something that can be undone when it needs to be undone. And if you're gonna solely go on this MOU, it says until further notice. And that's what they're designating it as. It's not fairground land, it is county land that the fairground was going to be able to use as a parking lot so that we could develop as a county. In my opinion, what I'm seeing is this is becoming a sheriff versus the board discussion when this is a community that we need to do what's right for the community as a whole and set aside the irritations that clearly come across when people are talking about this. Sheriff is not saying this is sheriff's land, it is county land. If we don't use this as the opportunity to make sure it maintains that parking lot until we need to expand, Bonner County cannot afford any expansion for where we need, and we need services. We would be denying services to Bonner County residents if we made a decision to do something that even the Fair Board has stated they don't want to do. And I do apologize for interrupting you. This is getting frustrating. On Thursday, in that meeting, you stated you would vote in that direction today, which is why this agenda was amended to say, allow them to put it on current fairground property. That is still a reasonable decision because even the MOU states that it's county property and fairground was being allowed to use it. Why is this board so intent on making this a campground when nobody in the interested parties, the fairground doesn't want it, the sheriff doesn't want it, but the community cannot afford this decision? And that should take precedence over any individual issues that you have. Because if you vote to put a campground on that section, you owe it to me as a taxpayer in the community to tell me, where are we going to expand, how are we going to afford it, and how are you not setting us backward decades because the price of land is ridiculously high? Where are we doing that in Sandpoint? There isn't a place. Identify the place, the location, and the cost before we strap the taxpayers with this burden. It's unnecessary. Fairground wants it to be a parking lot still.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Absolutely.
The misrepresentations of fact by some continue, as well as the heckler's veto that is so commonly used to try to prevent people from actually participating in the business of the county. One, an RV park, to begin with, you park something on a pad. I appreciate how quickly some are able to pivot immediately, because for the last month what has been said is this was the Sheriff's Justice Complex property, but today there's been an amazing pivot with the actual presentation of facts. Now personally, I'm more concerned with documented truth, and as been so often brought up, one commissioner does not make a board, just as one member of the Fair Board does not make up the body and the decision of that. So in regards to the property where a justice complex could be built, let me answer that immediately. There is plenty of room on that same piece of property with hundreds of potential parking spots. And if we talk about fiscal responsibility, a project that costs the taxpayer nothing, that is on a piece of property that has been designated fairgrounds property for the previous 10 years, but not fairgrounds, but for the exclusive use of the Bonner County Fairgrounds, that suddenly there's a pivot and we change our language, which is fascinating, and it's an interesting trope. But then in addition, we also have the actions of the Fair Board that are documented, and I am more interested in fact and truth versus allegations and misrepresentations of fact. I have multiple people who have told me that this is the right path, but what they don't want to do is, because of the way that our meetings are presented and because we have members of our board who, when they don't get their way, they attempt to filibuster, bluster, oh, thank you. And we have other members who make allegations of our elected body about decisions of the Attorney General, which I look forward to bringing, that when you read those decisions versus what the Attorney General said, there are two very different fact patterns. Now, the Attorney General is not a court, and a court is who makes the decision. An Attorney General makes a recommendation. And in regards to the ice rink, and if we were to go back to the picture, we're talking about two different pieces of property to begin with. The Bonner County Readiness Center is not the piece of property in question today. The property in question today is the one that was designated in 2014. And some of us, and I'm representing those people who have spoken with me, and I spoke with a number of them yesterday, and what they said, $250,000 a year at zero cost to the taxpayer is in the interest of Bonner County, as this is what will serve, protect, and sustain our rural heritage. And if we look at it, what was there first? The fairgrounds or the Justice Complex? The fairgrounds was. Commissioner Williams, I'm not done, if I may. I would appreciate the
It's
opportunity.
called reading, I didn't say anything, did I?
Oh.
I'm so thankful that you'd like to speak, but don't disrespect me, I didn't say a word. Continue talking.
Thank you for your permission.
You're welcome.
I think the facts are clear, Mr. Chairman. We have 2014, and we also have the memorandum which the Fair Board voted as is their duty to determine how they spend Fair Board money. The Board of Commissioners does not have the authority to mandate to the Bonner County Fair Board how they will spend their money. When they elected to agree to a 5% match, that was the Fair Board as a body giving their consent. And in that second phase, as well as the first phase, which they also voted to approve, was a diagram clearly showing where this campground would be. Now, we can have conjecture, we can have allegation, we can have misrepresentation, or we can go with the legal documents that have presented and been recorded by both bodies. And I'm going to go with the documents and the facts instead of the misrepresentations and allegations, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So in the MOU, it refers to this as county property, real property, to be utilized by the fairgrounds for a parking lot purpose until further notice. So the question I would ask you, Commissioner, is if we were to put your RV campground on that location, how do we, what is the future plan for expansion of the Justice Center that reasonably, one could argue that the cost of land would increase. There is no land around the current jail. So what is your future plan if we move forward with the decision to say, put the campground right there? How does it look in the county to expand it?
There's about 8 acres there, Commissioner Williams. You could actually do both, and that would be my plan, is that we serve both the Justice Center and the fairgrounds. I don't see this as an either or. This is not a lose-lose. That's what I find to be so aggravating. I actually have spoken with people. There is room to have a 40,000 square foot Justice Center, which could be interconnected to our jail. And there is also room for a couple hundred car parking lot in the old site of the Bonner County Readiness Center. And that would be adjacent to this RV campground. Now, as I have also repeatedly stated, if in the interest of a Justice Center, which I have never said I don't support because I do, it is not difficult to take out an RV park because all it is concrete slabs. But
$473,000 spent on that, and it's not taxpayer
Excuse me.
money.
So,
Can I ask a
may I
follow-up to what you
finish?
said?
May I finish?
Go ahead.
If you're thinking the stair thing impacts me, it doesn't.
No, actually,
That might work in whatever high school you taught at, but knock it off. Go ahead and speak.
I was waiting
ahead.
for your permission to speak and to
Well,
finish my
let us-
thoughts. So, Mr. Chairman,
You may continue.
I think it's clear based upon the documents and the facts and the votes of both Bonner County Commissioners for the previous 10 years and of the Fair Board over the previous 4, more so than conjecture, and I would move that we've had one vote, I move that we adjourn this meeting.
I would like to continue deliberating because you actually did
I have a
answer my
motion.
question.
There's a motion on the floor, Commissioner. Would you like to second it?
Can I make a comment?
No.
I'm not gonna second silencing people that came here to talk about a significant impact. You have
Well, I
sat
wanna talk
quiet, you
about
have
the
sat
dam.
quietly while Commissioner Oment has been very disrespectful to the public, very accusatory.
I don't think he's
These-
been
I know you don't,
disrespectful to the
because you
public.
two
He's
seem
been
to
proud.
think that this is okay, which is why the meetings go the way they do. These people have an interest. These people are not just here because of a piece of land. This negatively impacts our future. And to move forward with a motion to silence the people is not appropriate. This is not just the commissioner's county. The perception in this county is that the two of you are pouring gasoline on a damn fire here. They want to talk about the RV park. It impacts the future of Bonner County. It impacts the cost to Bonner County. We can't get any more money. So, yes, it might not be comfortable for the two of you to hear opposing opinions, but it's the wrong thing to do for you two to say because you'll vote together to end this meeting and not allow the people an opportunity to speak. And you'll hear about it in every newspaper in the morning if you walk away from this table. So if you want to second that motion, you move forward.
Well, I'm gonna comment now. And I'm gonna do it uninterrupted. There's some interesting things that's come forward in this meeting. Some are facts. Some have been misrepresented after they were presented by saying parking lot only, which I did not find in that paperwork, so we'll keep it all straight. It is actually in the best interest of the community because it produces income for the fairgrounds that otherwise the taxpayers would be paying. We were hired and we took an oath to serve the public to the best of our ability. This MOU was signed in 2014. People in this room knows that it existed, that were elected at that time. They also know that downstairs in facilities are the records on the jail. And they do in fact indicate that that was designed to go up 2 floors. And you remember looking at the proposed justice facility 4 years ago to the previous board, and it all fit on that property without touching the piece that we're talking about today. And it was suggested, Sheriff, if you want this, and it's a great ideal, I love the ideal. I'd love to get rid of that sinking building over there that the courts are in. All you have to do is propose a levy to the people to vote on for the $50 to $100 million it would take to build it. So another interesting thing that's come up in this meeting was covered in classes down in Boise at the IAC meeting, conference that some people chose to go to, some did not, and it's called serial meetings. While Commissioner Ahmed is the liaison for the fairgrounds, for me or another commissioner to go over there and have the same conversations that one of the other commissioners is having constitutes a serial meeting, which was covered in the class, but some people didn't go to the class, so they may not know that, but now they do. So that's another thing that came up. For me, my job is to make our dollars go as far as they can, and if I can reduce the amount of money that taxpayers have to spend, I will find a way to do that without cutting services. Like I said before, all county property is county property. It falls under the jurisdiction of the Board of Commissioners. At this time, I would,
Mr. Chairman, you gonna let me address those accusations, or?
no, I will not right now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
When I finish,
You will then.
I might.
So the accusation
No,
of a
I'm
serial
not
meeting
through.
is not
Commissioner
accurate.
Williams, thank you very
Jody
much.
Russell sent all 3 commissioners an email. And so to continue to make allegations,
Since you're not
especially
gonna-
about a class that you didn't even
Since
attend
you're not
yourself,
gonna-
I would be very
Ma'am,
careful.
I have attended it 5
And you didn't learn shit in
times.
any of them, because
Okay.
I was there.
Well,
So
this
don't
time I'll
come
step
at
down
me
from the
again.
chair and
Don't
second
come
that
at me again in a
motion.
meeting
Take a vote. Roll call
over
vote.
you ignoring it.
So you're plowing under $473,000. Plow whatever as you want, move it on the fairgrounds like all the fairgrounds want wants it on the fairgrounds.
Before we have to allow public comment, because you have not changed the
No,
structure of our
Steve.
meeting. You have not changed the structure of a meeting. After a motion is made and seconded, it goes to public comment. You don't get to ignore the public just because you don't like that, they're not gonna like what you have to say.
This is a
So,
special meeting.
This is a meeting that I scheduled. I scheduled this meeting. I requested this meeting, and I want public comment after the motions. I'm the one who requested it. Don't care that you don't like it. Mrs. Gunter, if you have something to say. Don't care. I requested the meeting.
So, I'm passionate about this fairgrounds, as you know. And as you know, the fairgrounds has asked for this RV park to be put on what is now considered fairgrounds property, not on the other piece that you guys wanted on. There's no reason to do that. We've got $473,000 that is not taxpayer, it's not free money. It's Parks and Recs money that came from our dollars to license our vehicles. We work hard, we meaning Bonner County residents like Pat Gunner, he votes on these. He is pissed that you would consider spending $473,000 and 2 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever the hell it is, and plowing it under, because now you're gonna use it for possible sheriff's property. It is not in the best interest. It is not in the best interest of us. People want this campground 100%. We're not saying don't put in a campground. We're saying move it over so we never have to plow the thing under. It's simple. There's the perfect spot on the fairgrounds. There's the perfect spot on the fairgrounds, and we talked the other day, and it's just unbelievable that you two, playing God here, for the last however months you've been in this office as you have, that campground can go on the current fairgrounds property like the fair board wants. We're not saying don't do a campground, we're saying move it over. You guys, you're playing God. You're playing against the sheriff is the only reason.
Yes.
It is the only reason you two are doing this. We know how you feel about the sheriff. Don't look at me like that, Luke.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm so angry.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, point of order. We have a motion on the floor. We also have a
Don't say that, Luke. Don't say that.
Mr. Chairman, we have a motion on the floor. Roll call vote.
And I again will say, public comment comes before we
You
vote.
are not.
I don't care.
You're the chairman.
You've steamrolled this community for far too long.
Cheryl,
Public comment, go ahead, Ms.
Would you
Cheryl.
quiet so Cheryl can talk?
Okay, so once again, this memo only gave permission to the fairground to apply for the parcel. This is the parcel for the fairgrounds, which is current fairground property, was then. It never gave him permission to apply for anything else. And in that application, I have looked at the application, it still says that everything was gonna be built on the fairground property. That parcel, it said the specific parcel of the fairground, nothing else. So putting it down on the Readiness Center is not the fairgrounds. And that schematic, you're correct, somebody snuck that one in. But that was incorrect for what they applied for. In the body of the application, they only applied to put it on this parcel, right here. And that's the only one they were given permission to apply for. So how is it you don't get that, Luke? And Mr. Bradshaw, please stop calling us reprobates in your sermons. I'd appreciate that.
Find a different name for it.
Okay,
When a
so
person is untruthful,
I'm not
that's the
untruthful.
category they fall.
I am not untruthful.
So, Mr. Rosedale, you had a comment?
Yeah, this is sort of a procedural thing. So if there was a resolution to make it forever parking, and it was referenced, I think, 7 times in all this, Commissioner Bradshaw, then you probably want to have a resolution undoing that resolution, agnostic to where you want to put it. Right now, there's a standing resolution that was adopted by Board of Commissioners to make that parking basically forever. And if you do something that changes that from parking to something else, the board should actually take that up in a separate resolution, because otherwise you might be violating some type of law.
Thank you.
Mr. Rose?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this is kind of difficult, and I wish that you would understand the gravity of the situation. First off, let me add as the resolution presented by the Central Committee, the paragraph number 1 was municipal laws that allow public dollars to be converted to private use and government entities to compete against the private sector or divert public money to special projects without support of the taxpayer must be repealed. That is in our Republican platform. Okay? And there's 2 items there that are of concern. One is we're using public money to compete against the private sector and the RV park industry. That's one. 2, we're using, diverting public dollars to special projects, to a project that you don't have the acceptance of the community for. I don't know where you're getting your information from, Luke, Mr. Ahmed, Commissioner Ahmed, but this is being violated right there. That's number 1. 2, the memorandum for a parking lot back in 2014 seems to satisfy the objectives of the county for the long term. That it will not receive construction money and be altered into some other form that requires destruction and more money to make it back to where it was originally. If you keep it as a parking lot, as we talked about last week, that piece of land is forever a parking lot for your RV park, and it's a parking lot for building in the future that the current people that are parking in the area that's going to be constructed will be able to put their cars on. And if you put pavement on it, it'll be forever parking lot. You keep the resolution, and it's always parking for both fair and justice complex. It never changes, but it never gets compromised. That is what appears to be the most logical thing that satisfies everybody in this room. It satisfies the Fair Board people, it satisfies the RV people, it satisfies the Justice Center people. What is so difficult about this decision? To confuse use of land and ownership of land is something that I'm hearing here in the request that we don't need an advisory ballot question. It's clear. It's trying to be confused. Use of land and ownership of land. Fair Board ownership of land versus county ownership of land are different. They have different attachments and responsibilities to the state. So, understand this is not as simple as it's our land, it's what we want. It is our land at the moment, but there are ramifications if you change it. We were here today to discuss the advisory ballot question if you were not going to yield to the community's interest of putting the RV park that will make your money, even though it's against the Republican platform, and as long as it is done in a way that doesn't jeopardize other building possibilities, we can look past some of the impropriety here. But we can't look past the impropriety of completely turning commissioner intent for the past 10 years on its head, because the intent is specifically and exclusively for parking. And so you're going to turn that on its head, and you brought it up. And that's what we're going to do. So every time we speak about this, we seem to change it even more so to an unacceptable fact to everybody. And so if we're here to talk about putting it on the proper place, which is agreeable to everybody, then I would agree we don't need advisory ballot question. If you want to continue to, how do we say, I don't know if there's a nice way to say it.
Just spit it out.
I probably shouldn't, but it has something to do with running down your leg and something in your throat. Then we're gonna need the ballot question. And I guarantee you, I can guarantee this. There won't be a reelection for somebody. And so if this is so damn important to you, then you just march down that road and say, yes, sir, 3 mouthful, and I'm gonna go, because it's the last thing you're gonna do in this county.
Mr. Linscott.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mark Linscott for the record. I'd had just a couple questions, mostly trying to get some facts on this thing. Is there a deadline on the $470,000 grant? I thought we were going to have to use it by this June.
It has to be started by June now.
No,
And,
their request to be more expansive, they have to request an extension, which they will achieve an extension for 1 year. And then if they don't meet that deadline, if they have another extenuating circumstance, they can get another year. So it's not accurate that it has to be 100% done by June. They've already applied for the extension.
That's not accurate. There's been no application for an extension. The current acceptance by the Bonner County Board of Commissioners is by June. We can apply for an extension. No one has done so at this time.
Mr. Linscott.
So can we ask Bradshaw to clarify, because I thought on our last meeting that he said he contacted the grant people, so maybe I misunderstood what he said.
There is a deadline on it. They will normally grant a 1-year extension because of the building times in North Idaho. Weather can screw up everything. They can do a second extension. They don't like to, but in extreme circumstances, they will. But they almost always, she said, will do a 1-year extension simply because of construction and weather and whatnot.
On this, the grant, was it site-specific with a legal description or
No.
parking them?
No,
It just
has to be on
general
county
lines.
property and has to be the 30 to 35 spots.
Actually, it said
Has to
fairground
fit
property.
within that.
It didn't say county
good.
property, it said fairground property. And so that is one of the
Right.
points of contention in the community, is that fairground property and
Is
county
county
property,
property.
the way in which it's being spoken makes it sound as if it's exactly the same. And it isn't exactly a one-to-one exchange because of rules regarding fairground property.
And I had last quitclaim deed that was granted in the Military Division State of Idaho, was granted to Bonner County, and I didn't know, I have not seen any subsequent deeds stating where the county's deeded to the fairgrounds. It might be referred to the fairgrounds, so it's Bonner County property, is that correct?
It's all Bonner County.
It's all Bonner County. A couple of things, it sounds like we're going down the road of probably not having a non-binding advisory ballot. But I guess for me, the bottom line is, Commissioners, you have a fiduciary duty to the people of this county for fiscal responsibility. My concern when I hear this grant of $474,000, and it's only going to cost the county $25,000, or the fair board, whoever it is, that's a hell of a rate of return. I just don't want to lose that. If it was placed on a map at the time of the grant, where the fair board, as I understand, the fair board agreed to it in 2022, was there a map associated with that?
Same map.
It's the
Yeah.
same map?
It's the exact location, Mr.
Exact
Linscott.
same.
So the fair board agreed to it?
Yes, they
At the
did.
exact same location where you...
That's
No.
correct, Mr. Linscott.
Mr. Linscott, let me tell you the clarification, because there is a discrepancy here. So, to be clear from the Fair Board, what they request is that, and this is from, they just became a full functioning board, I think it's about 2 weeks ago, so they signed their memorandum of understanding with this board. So what they are asking is not the location of the parking lot. They're asking for it to be in line with where their existing RV campground is. So their request isn't that we use this particular parcel of land. In fact, Jody sent an email to all 3 commissioners asking that we pull the Fair Board out of this point of contention because they don't want to be involved in the contention in the county. They're not asking for what this board is pushing on them. What they're asking for is just to be able to make their own independent decisions. As you know, Fair Board is not the same as the commissioners. So they've clearly identified where they want it to go. We have.
If this new board, that's been there for 2 weeks.
No, it's not even, they're not new as in people. It was that they had expiring credentials that would allow them to cast votes. So these are the same people that have been there before, and they have requested that we place it, one of the things is we shouldn't even be the ones deciding. This is a Fair Board thing, and you'll note that on every one of these discussions, the Fair Board is not here to speak for themselves, and that is problematic inherently. We have a Fair Board who wants to maintain autonomy with this particular board, and they are feeling the pressure from this board to do this idea of putting the RV campground on that site. They have communicated to all 3 commissioners transparently that they want this to stop. They don't want their campground there. They want it to be in full control of it on their piece of current property, is what they've asked for.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. That is, once again, a complete misrepresentation. A single email from a single member of the Fair Board does not in any way, shape, or form constitute official communication from the Fair Board, as is made clear in that email. And that email from Fair Board member Jody Russell only represents Jody Russell. It is not official communication from the Fair Board, and to misrepresent it is completely inaccurate. The Fair Board agreed in documents that are legally set forth, and they voted, this same board voted, the exact 4 members that are on there, they voted last year to spend $25,000 with the diagram, with the location as it is currently sitting.
Not with the
No,
description.
the description, there's a discrepancy in the application.
What's in the?
Chairman Bradshaw, may I approach you, maybe have Commissioner Ahmed and Commissioner Williams show me where on the 2022, on the grant application that the Fair Board agreed to, where that was going to go?
Can you give me, since you have the grant application with
Right
the
there.
language
This
there?
piece right there.
That piece right there.
I'll look it
So
up.
is it, how many acres is that?
It's like approximately 2.5.
Okay.
So there's a discrepancy in the legal
This is
language
the
of the
parcel
grant.
that was,
So, Mr. Linscott, that you
there's
can
the
see that
parcel,
part.
right there.
Southwest corner.
It is not, the verbiage isn't the same.
does have a
Parcel.
RP number.
Yes, it does, right there.
Southwest corner of Bonner County Fair.
That is what, so it could be that they didn't
That's the
understand the
fairgrounds
code.
parcel. What's
Well,
this?
like I
No,
said,
it's not
the Fair-
that.
right.
That is not this parcel.
Designated fairgrounds.
So
It's not.
So it belongs to the county. So I guess it is disheartening to come here, and all due respect to the Sheriff Wheeler and the Fair Board, you guys are going to make decisions. You guys are in charge. It's county-owned property. Of course, the sheriff's going to want something, the Fair Board's going to want something. So I'm going back historically to 2022, and as I understand, the Fair Board signed off on that?
Yes.
So
But
this
they don't wanna change their
application,
mind?
no, this, it's,
I've
we
not
have to
heard
be.
it from one of them that they changed their mind.
So, to be clear, the Fair Board has not been invited to a meeting to have this discussion before the board. What happened, for transparency, is there was a Thursday, March something, can't remember the date, where there was a meeting notice to discuss a grant.
I was there.
I was not present, I was at a different meeting, and the discussion went in to discuss Sewell Engineering and where to place the RV campground. The Fair Board was not, that wasn't considered a duly noticed meeting to discuss what took place. The Fair Board was not invited to that meeting. So it has gone downhill from there, with the Fair Board not being invited to the county to discuss what their issues, concerns, and wishes are for the Fair Board. One of the things that had to happen for this current board was they needed to have a memorandum of understanding with the county, and then they needed to make sure they had a quorum so that they could move forward. There's no need for us to expeditiously run through this decision, which is also concerning because the Fair Board has met twice now, 2 occasions since they were a complete board, to my understanding. They are working on this Jody's email is very clear. She is the vice chair of the Fair Board. She's not, her email doesn't answer all of the Fair Board. They're going to develop a letter and send it to this board. But they all work daytime jobs and they have businesses. And so some of the questions are coming, why do members of this board feel the need to rush and expedite without allowing the Fair Board a seat at the table to discuss what they want? Yes, it's county property, but it's not reasonable to push through and say, I'm in charge of county property, therefore I don't have to listen to the community or other interested parties.
For what you just said, Commissioner Williams, why rush it? So if the Fair Board's still gonna be meeting, I think moving ahead with any kind of non-binding advisory vote today would be in great error then. I mean, wouldn't you agree you want to hear from them before one is even worded?
The advisory ballot question doesn't bind anybody. It gives you objective information to tell you what the community is looking for
Well, all
with
due
respect to
respect,
those things.
objective is one thing. There's a lot of propaganda going out there, and if you control the narrative, you control how the vote's gonna go. All it's gonna be is mudslinging, it's gonna be even more divisive, and it's non-binding. So all due respect, I'm not in favor of non-binding ballot question.
It's not the most ideal option, I agree, but the problem is that this board has, even within the last week, you've had commissioners say, I would support just putting it on existing fairground land, and then changing that opinion. So the only thing in terms of a community that doesn't want to move forward, if you don't have that position from the board to just not make that decision or to leave it alone for now, it's to do the advisory question so that the community could give their input. Because what other option do you have if the board says, yes, I'll vote to hold off on that, but then they vote to move forward with something that hasn't been vetted? Because there's a lot of questions that have not been vetted. There's been statements made in that particular meeting you attended where the county could maintain control of that piece of land, but that hasn't actually been vetted once you've identified it as Fair Board land. That's a question that, when I listened to that tape multiple times, there's a lot of legal ramifications that were not vetted from that meeting, which again support not moving forward with identifying this parcel as campground parcel for the grant. It wouldn't be us being due diligent of resources. How do we take almost $500,000 to potentially just bulldoze it over when we need our justice center? Why not put it in a place where we can maintain it, where we can ensure that we can use it throughout the future of our Fair Board? If it is truly the desire that we get an income from it, why would we risk bulldozing it? Because you know we'd have to, because no other commissioner has told you what land we would expand to. So why would we throw $500,000, and would we potentially have to repay that money? We could, because nobody has done that research. People have just shot from the hip on putting the RV park on that land. But I would rather know that we would be able to build on that, to maintain that, because that is best serving the community. And we are not doing that by making this decision to make it a campground. So I agree, advisory, not the best option, but what else can we do when the sitting board wants to make a decision on it and will not use the idea of just waiting? They want to make a decision to use it. It's the only option you have.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, there is one person who throughout this process did that research, and that was Darcy Smith.
She's right here, and she's designated.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Don't interrupt, please.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. One,
Thank you.
prior to that Thursday meeting, I did reach out to both Chairman Russell, and I also Vice Chair Russell, and I reached out to Chairman Gordon as the liaison. Now, the fact that they chose not to get back to me, I don't speak for them, I don't control them. Darcy Smith
Right here.
did the research, and yet again, Mr. Chairman, I would call the question and vote for the motion on the floor to adjourn this meeting.
What's unfortunate
Mr.
is
Chairman.
that you don't get to call them and tell them to come. There's a noticing process there, and you are not the liaison for the Fair Board. And so this idea that they are accountable to you is not appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As noted in the document that was presented by Commissioner Arnott, that section that is red is called the Bonner County Readiness Center, which is that same piece of property. I'd like to just to make I'd just like to make a couple observations. So often, when we start a project, we intend to follow through with that project until we find information that prevents us from following through that project. I had a neighbor who was on the advisory board back in 1996, 95 and 96, when they came up with the plans for the jail that is currently being used by the county. The intention was to put a foundation for a two-story building so that that can be built up and expanded. As they proceeded with that, it was impossible to build a foundation and put the foundation for a two-story. And that was confirmed by Integris, who was the company, engineering company who came out and did that study in 2019. I think it started in either at the end of 18 and 19. And during that workshop that was held on February the 14th, it was, that information was shared with the engineers. I am not an engineer, so I cannot explain why it didn't work, but they came back with the conclusion that that building, the current jail, cannot be expanded to 2 stories. That's the story. Maybe the records that were filed in 2000 or in 1996 or 7 about the intention of going 2 stories, that's one fact. But another fact is that when we had the engineering study, they said it cannot be expanded to 2 stories. So it has to either go out or moved. So those are facts that we're dealing with. Part of the conversation was during that workshop was, what's it going to cost? And at no time during that workshop or after that workshop has an engineering company brought plans forward to myself or any of the sitting county commissioners. So for someone to come up and say it's going to cost $100,000, or for someone to come up it's going to be 40,000 square feet or 100,000 square feet, we do not know, because we have not looked at the requirements for the county, and especially future requirements for the county. The Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, since they built their jail, have added on to it and increased it 3 different times. So we are here looking in the future as our county continues to grow. How can we answer that question right now? Are we going to need that property, that 2.5 acre property, or are we not? And that question can't be answered because we have not looked at all the options. We have not got any drawings from potential drawings for a justice center. We don't know what the needs are for the prosecuting attorney as they grow. Are they going to need more officers and more staff member as the public defender? And what are we going to do? If we're going to make a tunnel or some kind of connection between the justice center and the current jail? And we have all questions about, can the jail be expanded? Can it be improved? Do we spend the money? Do we spend the money now to make improvements to the jail, or do we go and start from another point? We don't know. We don't know what the cost is. And for somebody, I know that figure of $50,000 to $100,000 or $100 million came up in that workshop. Nobody made plans. Nobody looked at that. And for someone to take that figure and just go forward and run with it, it's disingenuous because it's not a fact. Before I leave, I just want to tell you, this was, so it's on record if no one doesn't, but this was the suggestion I came, and Mr. Linscott, you can decide if this is prejudicial or not. And the question that we asked this board, I personally asked, and it reads like this. Background. In 1961, 43 acres of land was purchased by Bonner County for the intended purpose of developing the fairgrounds. And in 1990, 20 acres of land was purchased by Bonner County for the intended purpose of developing the criminal justice complex. Question: should Bonner County keep the construction of a recreational vehicle park within the current property boundaries of the fairgrounds as proposed in the 2022 Bonner County Campground Expansion Grant application to Idaho Department of Parks and Recreation? It's a simple question, and I don't think it leans one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, just one quick statement. Luke, it's okay. So, it will take one phone call to these wonderful people at Parks and Rec and explain the distension that's happening here and have them pull up their map and tell us, no, you can't put it on this piece of property, it goes on Fairgrounds property. I can make that call if you guys choose to do
I've
what
already
you're
talked
saying
to the lady
today.
with the grant, and she said yes. So
I
that's-
don't think you explained it right, Steve. I know, but I will make that call. I
Mr.
know
Chairman,
her.
and I did talk to them specifically, and the chairman is correct. He said as long as it's county property, they can do whatever they want. That came from.
But the distension it's caused will be very.
I understand, but towards that, I'll offer this. The workshop we had in January of last year, 2022, which was immediately preceding the application, submission of the grant, was in this room. Sheriff was there, I was there, and
I was there,
Kristen Dodd, I think, was there.
and I was
And
present.
I had conversation with Jeff Conley, Commissioner Conley at the time, right outside that door. And we specifically talked about that, how do we say, map that's on two pages that's on the map. And I had conversations with the sheriff all along saying that the picture shows it on the property we don't want it to be. And Jeff Conley said, it won't happen. It won't happen on that property. Right out there in the hallway. They wouldn't say it from that microphone. And so what we have is, and to your point, ma'am, I would ask you to look at chapter 183601, forgery, defined. Every person who, with the intent to defraud another, and there's a lot of people potentially defrauded in this county, falsely makes a written obligatory or attempts to pass as true and genuine any of the above false information. I'm not going any further than that today, but you better think about it.
Roll call vote, Mr. Chairman?
I'd like one comment again.
Oh, Luke.
This is by Darcy Smith as director of the fairgrounds and facility. And she specifically asked for this specific parcel, which is different from the Readiness Center. Right here, it's dated January 17th, 2022, signed by McDonald on 1/18/22, but she only requested that parcel. This is the memo that was sent to you commissioners, and you were there, you were in agreement. So any picture that was put in, slipped in there deceptively, deception. It said this parcel.
Falsely makes.
So, there is a motion and a second.
Can we say what the motion was, because we have
The
two?
motion is to adjourn this meeting.
So we're not gonna make a vote on the two topics?
Well, there's a motion and a second.
And I had stuff down from the chair and second it. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Ahmed?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
I find it highly inappropriate that this board would ignore the people. I find
Yes
it.
or no question.
Actually, I can answer how I'd like to answer, sir. I think that it's reasonable that this board allow the people the opportunity to have their voice heard. It is inappropriate for this board to make decisions for the Fair Board without them being reasonably represented. And it is cowardice, in my opinion, to not make a decision. The disregard and disrespect for the public is unfortunate from this board. If we move forward and we potentially have to tear down the RV, we are throwing away $500,000 that we could have had invested in our community for years to come if we have to remove that for expansion. That is not a good use of a resource, and I doubt very seriously that if we had to tear it down and then apply for another grant, that the government would say, oh yeah, you guys are good, after we threw their money in the garbage. I think it's a foolish thing to do. I don't think that this has anything to do with fairgrounds land, RV land. I think it is a personal issue between members of this board that is not in the best interest of the community. And the only thing that we can do as a community is hold the board accountable for the decisions that the board makes in the majority. So for that reason, I do not agree with adjourning this meeting simply to stifle the opinion of the community and disregard what's in the best interest. And I will end with saying my apology for using a curse word. I have a potential, I get irritated with the consistent comment from Bradshaw over a lack of education. I've worked very hard in life, and he knows what he says is not true, but he has said it multiple times, and I lost my patience, so I do apologize for that display. I vote no to adjourn the meeting.
Commissioner Bradshaw.
I'm gonna vote no to adjourn the meeting, because I'm gonna make a motion. So I will step down from the chair and make a motion to revisit the MOU from 2014, as Mike Rosedale had suggested. And then we will abandon the advisory vote at this time, and that will be my motion.
At what point, because we're gonna make sure, Mr. Chairman, that we have to, it's not agendized, so is that for a future date?
As soon as possible.
Okay, I second the motion.
The problem with that is
Roll
that,
call vote.
well, I can have discussion.
Roll call vote.
No, we first and
Go
second,
ahead.
we have a process in place that you have not changed as chair. If you'd like to change that process, then we have to amend that. The problem with that is the advisory, if we're not gonna make a decision, which it is on the agenda to make a decision on the advisory, the deadline is today at 5 p.m.
I think
And
that's
so-
the decision on there. You get to vote on it, to abandon the advisory vote.
No, I am asking that we have a discussion because there is an expiration. I understand you made the motion, but there is a deadline for this. And so,
Mr. Chairman, I would call the question which supersedes discussion.
actually, you don't get to silence a commissioner, and you've been told that a few times. I'm the
Actually, you can.
representative of the people, and as much as you guys don't like that, clearly, I'm gonna probably keep talking. So if you don't like the meeting, you can leave, and then we don't have a quorum. That's the way you accomplish that task. Otherwise, when I speak, I'm gonna finish my sentences. So it's inappropriate for us not to address the advisory question on this ballot. There is a deadline. And whether or not we like having an advisory question, this is of the people. And everybody at this table voted on the Republican platform. Central Committee has requested that we put this to the people because there is a cost to the people. A failure to hear the voice of the people means those who vote in opposition fail to represent the community. We are not leaders, we are not rulers, we are representatives, which is to represent that which is the concern of the community and ensure that we are following the guidelines that guide the position that we are in. This is a failure. Our clerk clearly told this board there is nothing negative that comes from the advisory in terms of the advisory question. There is a lot negative that comes if this board says no, because you are telling the people clearly, I don't care what you have to say. It is my decision, it is my property, and I do not support such an action.
Roll call vote?
Mr. Rose?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to.
Excuse me, I'm the chairman. I will recognize or not recognize. Do you understand how that works?
I understand how it should
Okay,
work.
fine, then hush and let Mr. Rose speak.
Thank you.
I will recognize people,
Mr.
not
Chairman,
you.
I'm just trying to, how do we say, decipher through the transparency here. A reconsideration of the resolution of the parking memorandum, if that's what I'm understanding. That resolution in place actually protects the non-construction, or protects the property from being constructed. To move to revise that resolution would be a move towards, how do we say, changing it from a parking issue or parking location to an actual constructed location. And to me, that is going even more so in the wrong direction. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it as in a transparent way, that that's what's going on. If that's true, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion on the floor,
Could we
Mr. Chairman?
provide clarification, because we have two motions regarding two separate issues. So is the intent of
Roll call
this,
vote.
is the intent of this board to change the designated area from a parking lot area, because you're making it an idea that we're going to notice something in the future, so I think you owe a little bit of clarity. So are we expanding this, basically removing the MOU so that you could build a permanent structure on it? Because that's what your request is that we consider and make a decision on. I can't make a decision because I don't know what you're meaning.
The motion was to abandon the advisory vote, and as per Mr. Rosedale's pointed out, to revisit the MOU. I never said anything about changing the MOU, revising the MOU, throwing the MOU away, ignoring the MOU, or any of the other bullshit y'all want to throw in there and misrepresent. But we are going to revisit it and look at it, and we will make a decision on it at that point in time.
Can you do two
Roll
separate?
call vote.
Can you do two separate motions so that we have clarity to the community on each
Same
thing?
motion. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Ahmed?
Yes.
Commissioner Williams?
I do not agree that this board should abandon the
Would that be a no?
advisory. I do not agree that this board should abandon the advisory question for the main ballot. I think that it is reasonable that this board get the input from the community and from members of the Fair Board, which it has absolutely no input from. It would be a decision solely based on board members without enough information. With respect to the review of the MOU agreement, which designates this land as specifically county property to be used by the fairgrounds solely for the purpose of a parking lot, I do not agree that we need to make that decision, as I don't find that it was even the intent to actually build a permanent structure. It was very clear in that document that it is to be revisited for future use, and it appears that this board wants to make a move to build a permanent structure on that land. And I don't think that that is in the best interest of the community. We need to be able to maintain a fair campground for years to come, not until we have the need. We can see the need based on our increase in population.
So was
So I
that a no?
vote no.
Okay.
Commissioner Bradshaw?
Yes. It is 10:10, 10:11, and I will adjourn this meeting.